Hello, folks, and welcome to Booghy Plays. Today, I'm playing again with questions, and uh, I am really happy and honored to have today with me the designer of one of my top 20 games, which is Snowdonia, and one of my top 10 card games, which is Foothills. So, what can I say? I'm really happy to. Also, he designed the other games, of course, like Gills of London and let me tell you much more because I have to look a bit here. What I liked is this. It says that in 2027 he will have the great game of time travel, the first edition, which is I would call it optimistic with today's fright problems, with today's postage problems, and also I think a bit funny. So without further ado, today's guest is Tony Boydell. Welcome, Tony, and I hope you're fine.
Hello, everybody. Yes. Did you notice that the great game of time travel? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear it just fine. Yep.
Yeah. I say if you go back to the beginning of my bio, that I released the second edition in the 1990s.
I see. No, I haven't
Um,
seen that. The second edition is in the 1990s. Okay. The first
yeah. I mean
edition.
that's the whole. It's a terrible joke, but
I somehow I realized it is a joke, but it's funny. No, nevertheless, it's funny. Um, so you've designed some games here, and I am a big fan of Snowdonia. We've played it here on the channel in Romanian. We'll play it also in English at some point. Also, I haven't played Lux Eterna, and I've heard about another small game of yours, which is Ivor the Engine,
oh
which looks like a very it is a smaller card game if I'm correct.
well,
Um,
Ivor's more of a it's a board game, but it's themed on a very famous British children's book
yeah,
and television
I
series.
see. But we'll
Um,
be talking about these more in the coming minutes. Um, First, I want to again welcome you, and the interview is going to have two parts. The first one is a bit more about yourself, and the second one is also about yourself. What is a fast questionnaire? So let's go through the first part, uh, which my first question is: where were you born, and where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in South Wales in a city called Newport. I was born just outside in a little housing estate on the side of a hill. I was born actually at home, and I was 6 weeks premature. My grandmother, who is Italian, she was so worried that I was premature that she called in a priest. And apparently she wanted him to give me the last
All right.
rites just in case I didn't make it. Now, I can't actually work out whether I was given the last rites or whether the priest told her that he was too busy or not. But yeah, I grew up in that area, and there's a big motorway that runs sort of east to west from London through to West Wales called the M4, and there's a tunnel system just outside the estate where I was born. So I used to go and visit. I used to climb the hills and then look over at this new busy road and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I grew up in that sort of area, South Wales, and I grew up in an area that had old canals, old railways, full of the industrial history of South Wales at the time, and it was just becoming modern. It was just sort of growing into, modern days, if you like. So this was the late 1960s.
And practically where you were born is, I think, is part of another board game which is designed by Martin Wallace, is Brass. Part does it cover a
Not,
bit?
I don't think Brass covers it. I mean, Brass Birmingham comes down as far
Yeah.
south as Gloucester, which is close to where I live at the moment.
Uh-huh.
But no, I don't believe there's a board game that covers Newport, South Wales. I'll have to check. If not, of course, I'm going to have to design one.
Well, If you do, I want royalties because I gave you the idea. Okay. And how did that time growing there shaped you as a person first?
I well, I was very close to my um, Italian grandmother, and they lived just down the road from where we were, and they ran a little cafe, um, which a lot of Italian families did after the war. They came over from Italy and they settled in South Wales, and they set up cafes and restaurants and so on. And so I used to spend quite a lot of my time growing up with my grandmother. And so I think I learned a sort of independence at that sort of time. I was quite happy to be away from home. I was quite happy to go and stay with my grandparents. My grandfather was a bit of an old ogre, but my grandmother was very loyal and very loving, very Catholic. So she used to take me to church, and then we used to go and get chips and watch the trains go by on the railway behind the house. Um, yeah, and it sort of, I think, fostered in me an independence. And because we were living in that area of the industry, it fostered a curiosity about that industrial life, about the valleys of Wales, about the coal, about the railways, about the canals, about all of that kind of stuff.
Yep. And how did you play something when you were a child? Do you have any? There were a lot of kids there. Um,
In the 1970s, all the children played outside. I mean, I don't remember many board games, to be honest with you. Not until I was approaching sort of big school age, secondary school age. But we would be outside all the time, whether it was fishing in the canals or whether it was, climbing trees, whatever it was. We were always out. That's my abiding memory of childhood, is sunshine and just being outside all the time.
and you went probably you went to university from there. Where did you?
Yeah, well, family moved, parents split up, and sort of life changed. But I went to university in the mid 1980s. And that's where I really began to develop my interest in games, because people I knew on my course, one of my closest friends still was running some D&D sessions. And so I kind of joined those out of curiosity. I thought, well, I've heard about D&D, I've never actually played it myself, so let's give that a go. And we also played a few board games, but it was mainly role playing at that sort of time in the mid 1980s. So that
And
was really my awakening to games.
what were you studying? What
I
was
was
it?
doing computers. I was doing computer science.
I see. A
So it was
pro.
a bit of everything, bit of coding, bit of analysis stuff. It was quite a new course, as you can imagine. The mid 1980s, we had just basically had home computers. So we had Commodore 64s and ZX Spectrums in our houses. We had console gaming was a big thing that was emerging. So the study of computers as a career, of doing computer coding, was very, very new as well. And so a lot of us, went from school, were big computer game fans. So a lot of us ended up going on computer-based courses to learn more about, you know, coding and design and physical architecture of computers and so on.
So since you are a child, you've shown interest in the how should I in the sciences, in science,
Oh
like
yeah,
math and
I loved sciences. I was never brainy enough. I didn't have the mathematics, to be honest with you, to do the really serious science. But I'm still an abiding fan of science documentaries. And one thing that was quite good in the UK in the 1970s and 80s growing up was that the science programs they weren't tolerant of sort of the general person. So well, by that, I mean, it didn't try and dumb everything down. If they were telling you about, the processes of how a star works, they would just tell you how the star worked. They wouldn't try and make it easy for you. They would talk about all the mechanisms and all the mechanics of it. And you'd be expected to kind of
get
pick
it.
it up and follow along. And
Yeah.
that doesn't happen so much. Now we have to have, good looking presenters telling us in very basic terms what it means. But a lot of us grew up on things like Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, where you bought this book and you read it and there was nobody there next to you to explain it all. You just had to kind of work your way through it yourself. So I'm not very good at science, but I do like it very much.
So and you started. It is important because a lot of gamers today are with a science background, gamers and game designers have
Yeah.
a scientific background. When did you say discovered D&D, and I suppose magic at some point?
Yeah, Magic came in the mid '90s. I was playing during my college years. I had a year out where I had to work with a company and get some experience of computer programming and that kind of stuff. And during that period, we did some role playing campaigns. Every Sunday, we would spend role playing with one campaign system or another. And then on a Wednesday, we started playing Risk and Diplomacy and Blood Royale and a lot of the kind of Games Workshop-y stuff at the time. And then when I went into the '90s and I got my first proper job and I got my house for the first time, got married, somebody at work had discovered Magic the Gathering and they were telling us all about it. And so we started going to pubs and playing Magic the Gathering. And I stopped doing role playing at that point then. It was really all about board games
Board
and
games.
Magic the Gathering. And Magic was a big, big addiction for a couple of years. As anyone who's ever got into Magic will understand, Magic really grabs you by the throat and doesn't really ever let go.
Yeah, I've, somehow I understood that. Nobody told me effectively, but somehow I understood that by the passion that everybody talks about magic. Uh,
It's a really important game design. It took something for lots of reasons. I mean, fundamentally, it's a game design that was refused by so many different companies, and it was this tiny company, Wizards of the Coast, who were used to producing role-playing supplements for White Wolf and others. Suddenly they picked this up, and nobody knew that it was going to be as big as it is. I mean, that's the great thing. People signed the Beatles eventually, not knowing exactly how huge they were going to be. Nobody made, movies with them expecting, knowing that they were going to, this movie would be nothing at all, and this one would be 300 million. And that's the joy of something like Magic, is it came out of nowhere and kind of proved itself against an industry that was like, nah, no one's going to be interested in that. You haven't even got bubblegum in the packs. What's going to make people want to play this?
yeah, somehow, yeah. And what was your first? You talked a bit about Risk. Practically, what was your first board game which you outside? I would say outside D&D, which It's more. I consider it more of an activity. I don't know how I should put it. Not necessarily a proper board game.
I think our favorite board game, the one that really took hold with us, because we tried a few in our Wednesday evening club,
Yeah,
was a game called Shogun,
Shogun.
or it's also known as is it Ikuza or
Yakuza.
Samurai
Yeah,
Swords?
yeah,
Yeah.
or Samurai
So
Sword. Yeah.
it's Risk, but it's got several layers of extra stuff. So it's got an economy. It's got secretly allocating your Kokyu to decide whether you're hiring the ninja or reinforcing an area, or buying turn order, whatever it might be. And we really liked Risk, but we really liked Shogun more because it felt like there were more interesting decisions. It wasn't just, do I push my luck going into Australia? Do I push my luck going across Europe? This was a much more considered round. You had to plan what you were spending your money on and who you needed to worry about. And, there were a little bit of negotiations going on as well, which is really lovely. So that was the first game that really took hold of us. And we played it a lot. So much so that actually we started suggesting kind of minor changes to some of the core rules. There are a couple of elements of Samurai Swords where you can travel by sea from one bit of the map of Japan to another region, and we found a couple of the regions were a bit rubbish, And if you moved the sea route to the one next door, it really made decisions much more crunchy. It made fortifying that region much more interesting. It made it much more strategically important. We also did things like everybody was allowed to swap one of their starting cards with another player before the game started. So initially you get dealt a series of cards and you're randomly available across the board. But by doing that swap with other players, you could kind of consolidate a base. And again, you kind of skipped then the first few frustrating turns of just trying to establish that core. At least now you could get into the game with a core already in place. And then you could start thinking about, do I want the ninja? Do I need turn order to, so I can get in against Mike before Mike got in against me, and so on and so forth. So we kind of, as a group, started doing a little bit of game design around.
Yeah, and when did the gaming process for you, or being a gamer, Was did you have any pauses? Did you have, or you played games continuously since you started since you found them?
No, I think it's been a constant thing since sort of those days. Even when we got my first house, I discovered Magic, so we were playing Magic: The Gathering at the pubs. Magic got a bit frustrating in the early 2000s, so I ended up migrating across the room where we played cards to the guys playing board games in the corner. So really, since the late 90s, I've been a regular gamer. At least once a week. In various forms. I mean, the end of the 90s was when I started Surprise Dare Games with my pal Alan Paul. So naturally, we were already thinking about games from that perspective as well, from that point onwards.
I see. And during this time, you were working as an engineer, or what
So
was?
I was a database person basically. At this point, I was dealing with Oracle databases, Unix administration,
Uh-huh. I
bit of
see.
scripting, all that kind of stuff. That was my meat and drink. I've since migrated to becoming a business analyst, so I can think about good things, but I don't actually have to put them into practice, which is great. So I can tell everybody what they need to do, and I
To
can
do,
sit
yeah,
back and
yeah,
they
yeah.
do all the actual work, which is really lovely for an old man like myself.
And what modern board game? When modern board games came to you? When did you discover them?
I think my real discovery was when I started working in London in about 2005. So previous to that, I'd been going to and from work every day, going home again at the end of the day. In 2005, I got a job in London that meant I had to stay away during the week. And I started playing board games in the evenings, almost every evening. So I'd leave home on a Monday, come back on a Thursday evening, and work from home on a Friday. So Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night were evenings to play games. And Monday night was always Magic: The Gathering. And then Tuesday night was Magic or board games. And that's when I discovered games like Power Grid, Princes of Florence, Goa, Settlers of Catan, all the usual suspects, the games to a great extent that still, are
Yeah,
still powerful games. Then,
powerful. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, games like Caelus came out and we absolutely devoured Caelus. And then in 2006, I think it was, my friend introduced me to Glory to Rome. And then in 2007, it was Agricola.
Agricola. Yeah.
And Agricola for me is probably the game that really changed the way that I wanted to play board games, sort of settled me on a style of game that I really enjoyed, that kind of midweight Euro, and also very, very influential on the way that I was thinking about designing games.
Yeah, I see Agricola a bit more heavy than midweight. It's a bit
You
heavy.
need to play it. You need to play it more. Then it just
No,
becomes a filler after a while. Honestly.
no, I've played it. Agricola is my most played game. I played it a bunch. I still think that if you have a good opponent, it's going to. Yeah, I usually play two player. You have a good opponent, it's going to be a good battle. You're
Yeah.
gonna get out extenuated. Um, so, in you, what kind? You transformed yourself. Everybody transforms in their life as a gamer. What kind of a player are you today? What do you enjoy?
I like the midweight Euros. I like the colourful Euros. I like my worker placement. Worker placement is probably my favourite mechanism. Um, I'm a little bit scared when it comes to some of the heavier games that are coming out. They kind of intimidate me a little bit. I'm kind of afraid, I think, of feeling a little bit foolish when I play a game. So I like to settle back. I kind of know where I am with worker placement. I like the space that it gives you. Um, yeah, but I'll try pretty much anything. I'll go from a light card game filler to sitting down and playing a Cole Whirly. I'll give them a go, but some of them do scare me a bit.
What scares you?
I think it's the big games that are quite overwrought. They're quite heavy physically and also mentally. So games like Imperial Steam and Barrage that they're quite unforgiving. I can lose myself in something like a Cole Whirly game because they're quite difficult. Things like John Company or Infamous Traffic. and you can make a mistake and it'll absolutely kill you. But there's something about the way that he builds the theme into the games that makes me not mind quite so much. It's a bit like you experience a Cold Worley game, whereas sometimes you have to kind of wade your way through a more complicated sort of traditional Euro game, if you like. One of the big favourites, the hotness is of the time.
So, are the rules, or the fact that the rules are just too complicated, or just?
Sometimes I find them frustrating, to be honest with you. I find it sort of, there's a lot of complexity, and it feels a little bit like, especially if you play with people who've played before, you're not really told anything, and you kind of dropped into it, and then when you're all packing it away, and I'm kind of a bit sulky because I've come last by a very, very large margin. Somebody will say, "Oh, Tony, on turn one you should have done this," and it's like, well, you could have bloody told me on turn one I should have done that. You could have let me take the move back and explain to me why that's a good idea, rather than expecting me to kind of, just because I'm a game designer doesn't mean I look at a game system and go, right, I immediately understand what goes on. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a deep scientist. So there's a certain amount of analysis when you look at a game that some people can do, and it's very admirable, but it's not what I do. I'm much more of a thematic person, and I find my way into games, and I find my way into the understanding the way it should work through the theme more than simply the raw cogs and wheels that you get in the mechanisms.
Yeah. I understand your point of view. This is the way I work also. But I also try to understand them mechanically. But what you explained is more of a player problem than a game problem, because if you have players which explain to you what you should do and help you, and also I kind of see that you are a very competitive person.
Well, yes, but a big problem nowadays is getting people to play games more than once or twice. And as a designer, this is in your mind. I mean, I can pride myself in designing the game that's got, lots and lots of variability, lots of replayability. But if no one's ever going to get past their second game, there comes a point where you think, well, what's the point? Why should I design variability into a game if nobody is actually going to sit with it and play it more than twice? And often, if the feeling you get from a game is, I love Agricola. Anybody that knows me knows how much I love it. I love it to absolute pieces. But I've met quite a few people in recent years who don't like it, not because they don't like the game, but because they were taught it in an environment where they were then crushed. They weren't given insight. They weren't given the chance to adapt. And the problem is, back in 2005, if you got Kalis or Power Grid out, you would play it 3 or 4 times in the space of a couple of weeks if that was new to you. Because, to be frank, there were fewer games coming out and fewer games available to you to distract you. And so those games reward you for taking an interest and replaying them, so you learn. Nowadays, games aren't treated like that. If you go to a games club, it's almost every single week there's a different bag of games from every single person attending. So if you kind of liked Barrage but came last and felt a bit worried about it, it could be weeks and weeks before you even get a chance to play it again, by which time you've kind of forgotten because you've learned the rules for another 5-6 big games since then. So I think, for me, that's a barrier, this idea, that we don't give games enough time because there are too many games to think about. There's too much to distract you. And I think a lot of games fall by the wayside because of that.
Yeah, probably. Also, I think people try to play too many games or people do not know what their lane is, and they try too many games, play too many games. I am not interested in all the games that come out. I'm interested in certain games. So, I am a reviewer. I play a lot of games, but for me, in order to review a game, I need to play it at least 5 times, 5-6 times. So I play games more than two times to see if it at least holds up its replayability 5 times, 5 or 6 times. I need to do that. So But for a lot of people, yeah, probably maybe once they play a game, maybe once, and the problem is you have reviewers which play the game once and then they have an opinion, but that's a whole other discussion. Hello, Matt.
Yeah,
Welcome.
yeah, I am supposed to be working. Yes, Matt. Um,
uh, so my next question to you is, when did you transition? When did you go from a simple gamer to, well, I have some ideas, maybe I want to design a game?
it was the mid-90s when I discovered Magic the Gathering. Because I know a lot of players who are brilliant players who have no interest at all in designing a board game at all. They have no interest. So in the mid-90s when I discovered Magic, I had been doing, during the 80s, I'd been doing a cartoon strip as a hobby of a rather crap spy called the Black Overcoat. And I'd mocked up a board game around the Black Overcoat, but it was very traditional sort of 1970s, 1980s approach to a board game. It wasn't very innovative. And I drew lots of counters with lovely pictures. Magic introduced an idea of how to perhaps present the physicality of the game, to get the variety and the story of the Black Overcoat and his family and the house that his family lives in. I could contain that universe in something as elegant as a deck of cards, albeit a very big deck of cards. And then once you discover something like that, and it worked, I was really pleased with the way that Magic helped me wrench the old game design into the new game design. And the family, as a young married couple, we played it a lot with our friends. We had lots of fun with it. And I started thinking about other themes. And when we had our first child, we had a book about animals of the world. And I designed a game about clearing up the world of pollution and then putting the animals back into their habitats. And then I did different games, short games. Copper Twaddle, my first published game, started life as a ridiculously stupid Mornington Crescent fake game. Sort of the idea of being a game had all these silly cards that did silly things. And there weren't really any rules. The idea was that people just made them up as they played the cards out. But actually, it evolved into a game that had proper rules with a proper structure and a proper goal. And once you start doing that, once you start having a notebook that's got your ideas and it's got layouts for cards and it's got interesting ideas about how counters can work, it becomes part of your equipment. And so when I was traveling to work on the train in the morning, I'd get my notebook out and I would do something. Oh, I'd like a game about primary colors, actually. I'll call it Pascal. Primary and secondary colors are lovely. Pascal. And eventually that became a game called Totemo, which we produced with lovely 3D blocks and everything else in the late 2000s. So a lot of those early ideas ended up in this notebook, and then the notebook became raided for the games that we subsequently started producing as part of Surprise Day Games. And at the same time, I was playing heavier games. I was playing Magic, but I was also playing Power Grid and Princess of Florence and St. Petersburg. And then Through the Ages came out, and Agricola came out, and Dominion came out. And suddenly, all this variety of mechanisms, all this variety of weights and complexity of game began feeding those themes. And so old themes that I'd kind of done a little bit with but never progressed suddenly got a new lease of life. Gills of London came out at the same time in my mind as Snowdonia did, these two sort of thematic ideas. And then it was all the games I was playing at the time that began to inform how I was going to implement them. So Gills of London is a sort of mishmash between El Grande and Blue Moon City. Those are two games that we played a lot and loved those games immensely in the mid 2000s, and they informed how I was going to implement this idea of a game about the commercial guilds of London in the 16th century. And Snowdonia was born out of a conversation where we were sort of joking about all these railway games that were coming out in 2005. Age of Steam was out for a bit. Yeah. There was Railroad Dice was out, lots of games, Railroad Tycoon, all these things. And somebody said, Tony, what railway game would you design? And I said, I'd do a game about, I don't know, a railway up the side of Mount Snowdon. Because I went up that railway when I was very small and I remembered it in the back of my mind. And I thought, I'll be contrary. I'll be opposite to everybody else. I'll think about a railway where it's very small and it's very confined. And all you can think about is actually digging up the track bed and laying the railway, not buying and selling shares across North America. I was being deliberately obtuse about it, saying, no, I'm going to do a tiny railway up a mountain. And that became Snowdonia.
Yeah. What I like about Snowdonia is the fact that I think it is one of the best worker placement games I have played, because you want to go in 3 spots at the same time, and you can't. You can only go into one, and if you go into that one, you will know that the other players will go in, and
Yeah, yeah. But that's the golden rule of worker placement. You should always have not enough actions or not enough spaces for actions than all the players want. And that's what introduces the jeopardy. That's what introduces the conflict between and tension between the players. And I'm not ashamed to admit that it's games like Agricola where Uwe designed the scaling cards for the different numbers of players. You know, the different spaces that were available, the different actions that were available were all key to the different players.
yeah,
And games like Le Havre as well, about the way that the physical design of things, the way that cards were double-sided and could be reused across different scenarios with different places. You know, those things very much influenced how that presentation was going to come along.
yeah, yeah. It is, and going to a certain spot for resources. But if you go for the last spot, you will get first player next turn. I mean, it is choices, 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 and this is why I think it's not only is a great game. But I've talked about this. Let's come back to you more. And what was your first published game?
The first published game was a game called Copper Twaddle, which we did ourselves. It's a two-player card game with a sort of medieval theme.
Ourselves, meaning you and
Surprise Dare Games,
uh-huh.
myself and Alan
Okay,
Paul,
okay,
and
yeah,
yeah, and we produced that. We both Alan designed a whole bunch of games in the 1980s with Standard Games, a UK company. And there's quite a few that, you know, they're still around and out there. And he had quite a reputation from that. And we both met playing Magic the Gathering. And because I'd started designing games and he had already had them published, we both kind of saw the modern world. We saw Magic, we saw Settlers, we saw this new universe of games. We both got excited about doing something ourselves for slightly different reasons, I think. Me, because I'd never had a game published and I really wanted to get a game published. And Alan, because he saw that the world had moved on and that people were more receptive to new ideas. And he was kind of, I think, frustrated in the 80s, the way that kind of board gaming sort of kind of fizzled out a bit in the mid 80s, because computer games were taking
we're
over
taking over,
everywhere.
yeah, up
Yeah.
until late 90s.
So yeah, we kind of came to it, and we both actually coincidentally we both left our current jobs at the time, became self-employed. So to be frank, we were earning a lot more money than we were as permanent employees with other people. So we had money as well, so we could actually invest a bit of money in producing our own games. And that's what started Surprise Dare Games. And Copper Twaddle was the easiest game. It was simply a deck of 54 cards. So it's the easiest game to produce. No counters, no chits, no board, just the rule book and 54 cards.
No minis.
No minis, absolutely.
um, and how did it feel when you saw your first published game? Even though you published it, but
Yeah, it was, well, yeah, I mean, Vanity Publishing, but it was
yeah,
very exciting because the first show that we took it to, because we didn't have UK Games Expo then, we didn't know, particularly outside of Magic tournaments, anywhere to go to with our product. So the first show we took it to was Essen Spiel in 2000. No, 2001 was the first Spiel that we went to. And we took it there. We set up a stand with lots of lovely curtains and decoration and medieval equipment, and we had tables with lovely tablecloths on it. We had costumes. It was great. And the person next to us in the booth next to us was Richard Breeze, and that was a kind of real discovery. That was a kind of a moment where we learned that there was a much bigger world out there than just Copper Twaddle. You know, it was like we went there with weird expectations. We thought that we would sell. We had 1,000 copies made, so we thought we'd sell all 1,000 copies at Essen because somebody told us there were 90,000 people at Essen. So we thought 1,000 copies would be easy to
easy.
sell. No, I think we sold 300 copies, which somebody afterwards told us was really bloody good, actually. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was very exciting to see. Although we didn't put my name on the box, it was only on the rule book because we didn't understand that that's what the convention was. The board game designer put their name on the box. You know, that we didn't realize that.
Yeah. And how do let's go through now. First, I will ask you, what is your design philosophy?
Well, I start with the theme. I need a theme that engages me first. And then I will basically kind of immerse myself in that theme and from that get a feeling of how I want the player to feel when they're playing it. And therefore, what mechanisms best serve communicating that theme and that feeling to the player. So with something like Lux Aeterna, which is a solo game, I was very much influenced by my favorite film of all time, which is 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Space Odyssey, okay.
And I wanted the player to feel like they were alone. And I wanted this feeling of being on a spaceship that was rebelling against you, that you were in jeopardy, and that it was just you that was doing it. And I was listening to the music soundtrack for it an awful lot on my car journeys. And I wanted to get that feeling of stress, of fear, of loneliness. And the best way to do that is for that sort of theme is to go full on 2001 and go for a one person solo game.
I see. I haven't played Lux Aeterna. I've heard about it, but I've never played it, so I cannot. Now you made me. I'm not a solo gamer, but you made me want to try it at least.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not much of a solo gamer. I don't really play solo games outside of my own designs. But when something thematically grabs me, I'll see it through as far as I can. I'm sure Matt will talk about it. Matt and I are working on a game at the moment, and I've gone way overboard on the thematic side of it, almost to making up my own language to go with it, really. And a lot of people are looking at it going, Tony, can we just have blank cards again, please? Because you're really confusing me with all of this.
I'm with you here. Theme is important, and I really think it helps a game a lot. How important you think is a developer for a game, and do you have the developer hat when you design a game? You put your design and developer hat at the same time, or you let somebody else do that job?
No, I'll do the design bit first. I'll just try and get as much of it out of my head as possible before I kind of put together my first prototypes. Then I'll kind of walk it through myself to see if it just fundamentally flows. And then what I'd like to do is to take it to groups of friends. So they are kind of the pre-developer. With Surprise Dare Games, there would be a point where I would hand it over to Alan and he would then take it away, or we take it to games weekends. Surprise Dare Games, for the longest time, and I still think they do this as well. They do these weekends where lots of British game designers would come over to their house and they would just bring all their prototypes. So we'd have Richard Breeze, Sebastian Bleasdale, Brett Gilbert, lots and lots of David Brain, lots of British game designers would come over and we'd all take a chunk out of each other's designs. And we respected each other so much that we would listen to each other. In terms of formal development, I've kind of done that with recent designs, things like Gills of London. With Snowdonia, it really was still within house. It was still Surprise Dare that kind of took a lot of control. Although Lookout Games, Hanno Gurk at Lookout was really instrumental in just finessing it, really sort of boiling away some of the problems with it. So actually, I suppose the tail end of Snowdonia. The funny thing about Snowdonia is I passed the design on to Lookout, and Hanno would send me emails saying, the solo game doesn't work, the two-player game needs a bit of work on it, but fundamentally the heart of the game is absolutely fine. And then we were talking about layouts. Clemens Franz would start sending me design layouts. At no point did I ever sign a contract with them to say, Lookout are going to produce this game. And just bear in mind that Lookout Games produced Agricola. So Lookout Games are one of my favorite board game companies of all time because they gave me Agricola. So it's quite surreal to go through that process. And then suddenly at Essen in 2012, we've had pallets of Snowdonia on our stand. And at that point, I realized that we've been through that kind of development process without realizing it. We'd kind of got to this point without, what we would now recognize today as the gateways that games go through before they get published. It was a much freer sort of world. But then there were fewer games companies. So, you had less competition. Nowadays, a game has to be developed. Absolutely. Because if it's imperfect, it's going to get ripped to shreds and it'll never get looked at. And the danger with games like that is that it not only taints the publisher, it taints the designer as well. Yep. Which means the next time you've lost that goodwill that you might have had with the consumer.
Yep. Yep.
So you really have to engage a developer now. You have to make it a more formal process. You have to get somebody to develop the physical layout of a game. Is it intuitive? You need the UX of
The
the game
UX,
to
yeah.
be absolutely right. You need, the story needs to be right. The rule book needs to be absolutely 100%. There's no excuse for a bad rule book. Paul Grogan has been telling us for 10 years now, that you need a good rule book, and Paul is really good at doing a rule book.
Yeah,
Um,
you need. Yeah, you need.
there is really no excuse anymore for having a bad rule book. So yeah, now you're down to the point where lots of companies have got all of that. They got the developers, they got the rule books, they got the graphic design, and now they're having to sell you the extra stuff to take your money from you. Because now you're looking at 100 games that are all equally brilliant, great theme, beautifully designed. Now, what is the one thing that's going to make me buy that? Oh, it's got miniatures. Oh, it's got extra stuff. It's got expansions included. We're into that
Um,
phase.
I'd say that a tight game design. You are right. There are a lot of good games, but tight designs, good old simple rules, hard game to play, are rare even today. So I think for gamers, it's always about market in the end. Okay, what is your audience? What type of game are you making? Who are you making it for?
Yeah.
If you wanna make it for the people who want to play it once, it probably won't matter, or twice. But if you want to make it for someone who wants 10, 20, 30, 40 plays out of your game, then you will need to create a product which is, this is for me, which I'm an old, at least around 10 years since I'm playing games. This is what I think is a great game: comprehensive rules and tight gameplay.
Yeah, I think this is the difficulty, the temptation, I think, to try and stray into designing a game that you think the market wants, as opposed to designing the game that you
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
entirely confident in.
yeah.
I can't imagine ever compromising myself to try and just be that kind of cold and sterile about approaching the game design. Because if I don't love the game myself, how am I going to make any? How is anybody else going to love it? I mean, I joke that I love playing Snowdonia because it's a game I designed for myself to play. It's got all the things in it that I love about worker placement games.
Yeah, but I think it's important to do that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like a band would write a song, or somebody would write a song that they don't like to sing. How would they be able to pour their soul in a song which you do not like to sing? Or somebody makes a film who doesn't. It will come as a superhero movie, a theme park ride, as Scorsese called them. These are superhero films. Uh, it won't stand the test of time in the end. And I think this is an important part of game design. Can you make a game that can stand the test of time? Then
yeah.
you in a way you win your immortality with
Yeah, but you can't plan it. And so the thing about
no, yeah.
Snowdonia, I think, is that I never thought it would sell more than 700 copies. I thought it was going to be the kind of game that railway gamers would like to collect. So we'd probably sell 750 copies if we produced that many. If this was before I spoke to Lookout, because it would just go to railway gamers and they'd get it because it was curious and it was low print run and so on. And I think what actually made Snowdonia persist in people's minds, it wasn't just that Lookout picked it up, but having their name in the box is a real cachet. It added real weight that they had confidence in it as well. But I think it's because Snowdonia is a system that when we started producing these little tiny packets of expansions, really small, really easy to produce, really cheap, importantly, we're talking pocket money to buy the expansions for the next few years, that it kept the game in people's minds. They're going, oh, Snowdonia, that's an expansion for it. Oh yeah, I got Snowdonia a couple of years ago. Oh, I'll get the expansion for it. It's only €6.
Yeah.
And it kept staying in people's minds. And if and I mean, that's why I love Power Grid. Every year I'd go to Essen and I'd think, right, I need to get the next Power Grid map. I don't care where it is, what it's about, what it does. I just want the next Power Grid map,
I can understand that. Yep.
And it makes it a game that still persists in my memory. Concordia is exactly the same. Oh, Max got another Concordia map out. Right, take my money. That's it. I'm there day one of Essen. At Max stand saying, I'll have one of those and one of those, please.
Yeah. So, what is your most played game?
It's Agricola. I've played it probably physically over 1,000 times, and I've definitely played it online more than 2,000 times.
Ooh.
I absolutely. It doesn't mean I'm brilliant at it. It just means it's my safe space.
You know the ins and outs of the game by now. I mean, if
I'm really good at teaching Agricola. And I tell you what, the people I teach it to nowadays, I am very keen. I don't care what the result is. What I'm keen is that they don't miss things, because a lot of people come to a game like Agricola with preconceptions. Oh, it's really painful. Oh, it's really difficult. Oh, it's really hard. Oh, it's really punishing. And I like to point out things during that game, that teaching game of, where they, all the way through, right through to the end, to say, you could do this now and think about this. And by the way, so-and-so, you should think about this. Oh, look, somebody's left 6 wood over there. I know it's none of your plan to care about wood at this point in time.
But you need to take it.
6 wood is brilliant.
Yeah.
Believe me.
Yeah.
Because if you watch somebody else take it, you'll think, oh, bloody hell, that's not fair. He's got 6 wood now. So you be the person that opportunism is really good in a game like that. Sometimes you just got to, it's an offer that's too good to refuse.
Too good to refuse, yeah. It is, Agricola, it is why I think you like it, and why I like it. It is because I think it is theme driven also. Everything makes sense thematically. And in the end, it makes you feel like you went through the 1800s and you suffered through those times. The brain tells you that, But I can talk about Agricola 1,000 hours. What is your favorite game? Still Agricola?
Well, see, this is odd, you see, because I think it probably is. Although I am very much a fan of Nussfjord. So this is just, the great grandchild of Agricola from Uwe Rosenberg. And I do like Power Grid a lot as well, for lots of different reasons. And I do love Glory to Rome. Glory to Rome, I proudly say, is my favorite card game. I think it does what it does so well. It gives you those endorphin rushes of big turns where you do loads of stuff and have a fantastic time, and then it's also equally frustrating when you don't draw what you need and you find yourself getting stuck. But I find a game like that quite leveling. But games like Agricola and Glory to Rome and Power Grid, you need to play them a lot. You need to immerse yourself in them, because only then will you begin to see the subtleties at play. And that makes your play of the game better, and that makes the games that you play with other people much more rewarding. So the best thing in the world, and it's a very rare thing, is to sit down and play Glory to Rome with 3 other people who know the game and don't need a rules explanation. Just to get 4 people around a table playing it properly. They all know the game, so they're all knowing what they're going for. And that's quite a rare thing, because people can't get Glory to Rome, therefore you tend to be teaching it a lot with people. Same with or if everyone knows the game.
Did it have a Hungarian release or something? I think it had a Hungarian release. Glory to Rome. Such a big problem with that game also. It's unavailable and everything. And my last question, who is your favorite designer?
It's Uwe Rosenberg. I know I'm supposed to say Matt Dunstan. I can't see if he's still on the call.
I don't think he's here with us.
but I think it's Uwe Rosenberg. I love the flexibility. I like the fact that he started life with card games, a really interesting design space. He then, out of nowhere, gave us Agricola, and then the following year gave us Le Havre. He's given us Patchwork. He's given us Nussfjord, which is everything you love about his worker placement, but with a fantastically tight economy in a fantastically tight space. He's given us Glass Road, which is, again, it's that delicious conflict of a group of people who know each other having to kind of work out what cards to use for that round. I mean, he's a work of art. He really is a work of art.
well, I don't disagree with you. And because I have this motto, which I really like, and I try to repeat it as much as I can because it is so true in this world we live in, which says ignorance. There's no other authority like it, which Orson Welles said at some point. I don't want to be. This is a point I try to make in my life. I don't want to be ignorant. I try to learn as much as I can. Would you want to add something that I did not ask you? Would you want to say something that I did not? Which you think?
I think I would want to mention that I now have a museum of board games.
Oh,
Going to all these shows, as you do, going to all these big shows with a games company and as a game designer, I've come across lots of games, and I collect interesting games, spend a lot of time in the smaller halls at Essen finding all the interesting stuff. But I also came across vintage games and secondhand games. And so my love of an interest in those older games has been stoked over the years. And there's a lot to be gained from looking at the way old games were designed. You know, we think we're in a golden age of board gaming now, but we're not. This is just a repeat of what it used to be like in the 1950s or what it used to be like in the 1920s. We had these huge explosions of interest in board gaming, you know, before the internet, before all these television channels, before all this technology. People's leisure time was spent doing sport or as doing board games together as families. And it wasn't just Monopoly, it was parlor games, it was all sorts of other bits and pieces. So as gathering together a collection and then curating my collection to get older and older stuff, to try and piece together a timeline from the earliest games, you know, in the early 19th century to the games where you're learning about life and good morals and how to be a good person, right through to games that were innovative and interesting in the 1960s and 70s, you know, all sorts of stuff.
And where do you have this museum? Where is?
Well, it's in my hometown of Newent in the Forest of Dean. So I'm on the border between England and Wales, at the bottom end of the border, if you like, near the town of Gloucester. But in the Forest of Dean, there's this little town. And in the little town is a little building. And in that little building is my museum, where I've gathered together all my stuff. It's been going about a year now, and it's small, but it's perfectly formed. And we're quietly gathering patrons via my Patreon. We're quietly gathering exhibits. I do radio interviews. I've been invited to go on television stuff in the UK. So quietly, I mean, we're nowhere near the scale of, you know, the Spiel Archive in Austria or, you know, those kinds of things. But we're a start, you know.
Yep. Sir, I am, like I said, very honored you accept this. You really are a lover of games. This is what I got.
Just a bit, yeah, just a bit.
Now we will finish this interview with my questionnaire, which is derived from the two big questionnaires of Proust, and it was first made by Bernard Pivot, a French television host, and then it was taken by James Lipton. I don't know if you have ever seen Inside Actor Studio.
I have, actually. Yeah. No, and I also watched Matt have a go at this last time. Remember, I was lurking in the chat on.
Yeah, you were. So let's go. What's your favorite word?
I think my favorite word is fuck. And I've been known to, I mean, I'm sort of, people know me as somebody who swears a lot, but I like swearing when it's used in the right context. I don't like it as an aggressive word. I like it as a comedic word. I find it very good at punctuating a joke, and the word fuck in a joke can be very effective. It's shocking to me when my wife uses it, because she doesn't swear very much at all. So when she says fuck, it means something is seriously wrong. So I love its versatility. I also like the fact that lots of people don't like it. So I quite like kicking against the conventions. It's the 21st century, for God's sake. Get over it. It's a word. You know?
Well, I try to remember that George Carlin did 7 words which you are not allowed to say on TV, which were fuck, cunt, tits, I don't know. And the whole point of all that bit was the fact that they are words and they mean nothing without a context.
Yes. Although although the word cunt has got a very notable and very illustrious history. Just bear in mind, I think I would recommend people go and look it up. There's a great video by a lexicographer called Susie Dent. She's famous in the UK because
Yeah,
she's
yeah,
on a
I know
television
who
program.
she is. I know who she
But
is.
but she has a lovely documentary about where this word comes from and what it means. And it's a much more appropriate word than a word like vagina, for instance. Vagina is a very male domineering word for that part of the body, whereas cunt is a much more honest word, and it's a woman's word. It's a female word, and it should be used like that. Yeah, I'd recommend it. I think there's very few taboos, really. We've got to get modern on this.
Yeah, we should. What is your least favorite word?
Nice.
No.
Nice is such. It doesn't mean anything. Just swear or don't do it. Don't say nice. If you don't like something, say you don't like it. If you do like it, be really enthusiastic. But if something's nice, then it's nothing.
Yeah. What is that? Women don't like nice guys, no? How is it? Because
Oh dear. Don't no. Nice is not a very good word, is it? It
yeah,
doesn't mean anything. It's halfway between anything at all.
yeah. What turns you on creatively, emotionally, spiritually?
I like a really in-depth story. I like something that absolutely transports me, sucks me into it. So I'm rereading my Ian M. Banks books at the moment, his culture novels, and they are so rich that they absolutely bring you into that universe and you want to be part of it. When I sit and watch 2001, I absolutely cannot be disturbed because I'm totally pulled into the environment, the music, the coldness of it all, the languid nature of the storytelling, the fact that it takes its bloody time about it. And it, I love to be taken away into a different world. And yeah,
Yeah, I am there with you. I'm not as big a fan as you are with with the Space Odyssey. I like more. How is it? Barry Lyndon. I'm more probably because I love I'm more of a history. I like history.
yeah,
I like going into those times and trying to see how people were back then. And there is a way how he plays with music, how he plays with
yeah,
set design, it's a whole world there, and it's a film like 2001 everybody should see. But
yes,
and in these days there are very rare films which do what those films did back then. Um,
I agree.
and what turns you off?
I think I'm fundamentally a lazy person, so hard work turns me off. I'm quite in my work. I'm quite quick. I can do things quite quickly. I write documents very quickly. I think about things and bam, it comes out very quickly. And I think fundamentally that's because I'm lazy. Why would I want to spend 8 hours doing a job when I can spend an hour doing it? I think hard work turns me off.
Um, I think your grandparents worked hard for
Yeah,
what they.
absolutely. They worked hard so I could be a bloody lazy slob.
What is your now? This might be a bit redundant. What is your favorite curse word?
Well, I've already said that, haven't I?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's my favorite word.
also. What sound or noise do you love?
I like the sound of bacon frying because that sound, if you just played that sound as a sort of ASMR thing, people immediately feel hungry. You
You
can
have the
smell,
noise. Yeah, you can
yeah, you
the
smell the
smell. Yeah, the smell,
savoriness
not the
of it.
noise.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's a lovely sound, isn't it? Also, to be a little bit more romantic about things, I think there was a a few years ago there was a friend of mine when I was working in a particular job. Her her husband died, and we were all very, very sad. It was a very emotional time, and we were very struck by the fact that he wouldn't be able to see his children grow up. And I remember sitting in my youngest child's bedroom after he'd fallen asleep, and I just sat there and I listened to him breathing and sleeping, and I found it the most emotional experience because I just felt so privileged to hear him at peace, to hear him sleeping and with no worries, young enough to not have any worries about the world. And I just thought the sound was such I'm beginning to tear up as I talk about it. It's such an emotional thing. It really connected, and
Yep.
it kind of reminds you of a time when you yourself didn't have any worries, that you could just be tired and you could fall asleep, and you didn't worry about paying for the house or going out to work or where the food came from or what was happening in the world, about war and poverty. It was a time when it was so simple and so innocent, and that was a lovely sound. It was quite something.
And what
So that
sound?
my son sleeping and the sound of bacon frying. There you go. To the sublime and the ridiculous.
Yeah. What sound or noise do you hate?
When people scratch down a blackboard
Yeah, I know.
with their nails, I
Yeah, yeah,
think
yeah.
most
I
people don't.
don't think today youngsters understand this anymore because today's black chalkboards are
Well,
you
they're
write a,
electronic,
yeah,
aren't they? They're yeah, marker pens and stuff.
or
Yeah, but
marker. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
scratching
yeah.
down. Oh.
That yeah. Or you could do it with the chalk also and it was awful. Which profession outside the one you already do would you like to attempt?
Oh, I would love to be an astronomer. I'd love to be a cosmologist. I would love to be smart enough to study the universe. I mean, I still take a very deep interest in, all the developments, think from the Large Hadron Collider, the work with the Higgs boson stuff, particle physics, cosmology, the telescope pictures from the Webb telescope, just those things absolutely astound me. And I would love to have been smart enough to be in that career. Unfortunately, I get to do IT stuff. I'm a business analyst. But
Well,
I still keep half an eye on that because it's so awe-inspiring.
it pays well for that bacon. What profession outside the one you already do you would not like to attempt?
Well, I did a stint as a barman when my dad had a restaurant many years ago, and I spent I was the only person in the. They all went off for the evening, apart from the chef and me, and I had to look after the bar, and I was the head waiter for the evening as well. And I would hate to have to do that. I mean, the evening was exhausting. Never let anybody tell you that job is easy because it's not. It is. You've got to be nice when people are being horrible to you. You've got to juggle all the figures, who wants what. You've got to keep a track of everything. You've got to chase things along. I mean, it's unforgiving, and I never want to do it again. I'm happy to be the person sat at the table having all that done for me, but I never underestimate what it takes to do that job.
Um, and my last question is, if heaven exists, what do you expect God to say to you when you arrive at the pearly gates? If.
Well, it is an if with me. I think I would hope that he was a little bit more. I'd hope he was a little bit more forgiving of my lapse. I was raised a Catholic, and I was a good Catholic for many years, but I've become very cynical for various reasons about it. And I'd hope that he would understand that
As
and
you
say,
do.
"It's all right, mate. It's all right. You were okay for thinking what you were thinking. I understand. I understand why you thought that. Now come on in, pull up a cloud, and have a good time."
Thank you. Hello, Tony. He asks a question: who is Bridget Mendler? Bridget
Hang on.
Mendler.
I'm gonna have to go here. So who's this?
I don't know. Somebody who's asking us a question. I don't know who.
I don't know who Bridget Mendler is either.
I don't know either. So I'm sorry. We don't know the question. So thank you. On that note, I want to thank you again for accepting my invitation here in my virtual gaming room in this virtual comfy chairs. I hope they are comfy. I hope you had a good time. I hope you
I
felt
did.
comfortable. And well, see you probably in Essen if you're going to
Yeah,
be
I
there.
hope so. Yeah, come and see me. I'm planning to be at the Frosted Games booth to promote Aleph Null. So yeah, thank you for having me on. It's been an absolute treat. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Again, I will kindly ask you not to close your because I will do the outro and then we will finish everything afterwards. Uh, Bye bye. I want to thank, as always, I will thank again Tony Boydell for coming here on my little small board game channel, pesky board game channel here from Romania. I hope everyone who watched had a good time. I want to thank everybody who came and watched live. I want to thank everyone who will come and watch after the fact. If you like what you see, please like, share, and subscribe, because keeps the internet alive, and also it helps me. Every subscriber I get, it's easier to talk to publishers. It's easier to keep me going. If you want to, you can support the channel on Patreon. And well, I have nothing more to say. Then I hope we see each other at the next playthrough or next interview. Until next time, I will say, as always, play a lot, as it says here. Play loads, as you Brits say. Have fun. And until next time, bye-bye world, wherever you are.